Ātmacaitanyamāśritya dehendriyamanodhiyaḥ Svakīyārtheṣu vartante sūryālokaṃ yathā janāḥ. Depending on self of the nature of consciousness, the body, senses, mind and intellect engage in their respective activities, just as sunlight heralds activity amongst people. In the previous shloka, we learnt that all the activities done are attributed only to the mind and senses, whereas the self remains untainted by all actions and their results. Then one may get a doubt that do these senses ever act in their own accord, since it is said that consciousness does not move, changeless, motionless. So, the doubt is that do the mind, senses, etc. have the source energy within them to act on their own, since Acharya is telling that consciousness is actionless, motionless, changeless. To answer this, Shankara explains in this shloka that just as how people work depending on the daylight of the sun, the senses, mind and intellect act only due to the consciousness, the sunlight. The witnessship seen in the above two verses as a figure of authority that inspires action and is here seen in a third perspective as the energizer that sets everything in motion. Ashritya, depending upon. Jagadashaya Shri Raghuramavisinha, depending upon. The self is first defined as the nature of consciousness, to indicate that it is just a witness of all activities taking place. That was in the last to last verse. The body, senses and mind and intellect depend on the self to do their work. What are they depending upon him for? They depend on them for the power that energizes them or galvanizes them into action. Sūryālokaṃ yathā janāḥ, the energizing sun. The sun has the power of getting things moving. The word Surya itself literally means that which moves others. When the sun rises, people move. World moves. The birds start chirping. Everything in nature awaits the signal from the sun before engaging with their work for the day. This beautifully compares with the situation of the self. which as though gives consent and all the things get done thereafter. In one of the previous verses, we went through a detailed explanation of how consciousness illumines the intellect. Once the consciousness illumines intellect, then the ego of a being goes on to absorb the reflected consciousness in the intellect and then passes the same to body, mind, senses. We know this. Coming back to the iron ball and the fire, the iron ball is brought in connection with furnace, then or fire. Then with the heating process, the iron ball assumes the nature and quality of fire and glows like the fire itself. Exactly in the same way, the ego iron ball gets in touch with the reflected consciousness in intellect, fire, and then the ego itself gets conscious or sentient, and there from the ego the reflected consciousness is passed on to the body and senses, so that the body and senses become conscious. Thus, without this consciousness, there is no activity possible. But the self by itself is ever pure, niranjana, and is not affected by the actions of the senses. Senses seem to work only due to consciousness, but consciousness is never affected by their actions. We have to never forget that the illusory duality can never affect the self. It is only due to ignorance that one perceives the senses world of duality, etc., and hence all the actions are undertaken thereafter. Chapter 5 of Panchadashi deals with the four Mahavakyas, and the chapter itself is titled as Mahavakya Viveka. In that, the first verse, Prajnanam Brahma, that is what is described further in today's verse. Prajnanam Brahma is from Rigveda, is from Aitareya Upanishad. What is this Prajnanam Brahma? What is the inner meaning of this? If the senses, mind and intellect are mere instruments to carry the information, then what is it that enables that information to be understood as knowledge? This factor of knowing is pure consciousness. It is consciousness which vitalizes these instruments of knowledge and enables knowledge to take place. That in us which knows a thing is referred to as consciousness, prajnanam. Senses, mind and intellect are philosophically considered to be insentient, inert objects, jadavastu, being only instruments. Their functioning is due to the presence of consciousness in them. The differentiation of pure consciousness begins only when we start fixing a limitation to the subject with whom it is identified. When we limit the subject to the physical body, it is body consciousness. When we limit it to our own personality, it is called individual consciousness or the ego. When that individual entity is widened and identified with a collective group, it becomes a group consciousness, such as I am an Indian associated with the group of Indians. That which is ultimately responsible for all our sensory activities as seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, etc. is consciousness. Eye of the eye, ear of the ear, mind of the mind, prana of the prana. Though consciousness does not directly see or hear, it is impossible to have these sensory operations without consciousness illumining them. Hence, it should be considered as the final meaning of our mental and physical activities. Brahman is that which is absolute, fills all space, is complete in itself, Purnam, to which there is no second, Advitiya, and which is continuously present in everything, from the creator down to the lowest of the matter. It being everywhere is also in each and every individual. Thus, in sequence, we learned in the last 3 verses that consciousness is a witness, we said in the last to last verse. And then we understood consciousness is changeless and motionless. With the moon example, where we said that moon appears to be moving whereas it never moves. In the current verse, Shankara asserts that it is only due to the changeless, motionless, witness, consciousness that the intellect, mind, senses, body are all enlivened. The sun has no association with the world it illumines, but without sunshine, the world cannot wake up to function. It is literally experienced when one exists in samadhi and then gets up. In samadhi, an advanced sadhaka or a seer exists as pure existence consciousness. While in samadhi, there is not even this awareness of existing as pure self, consciousness, etc. But when the sadhaka or the seer opens his eyes, and with the backdrop of all the Upanishadic knowledge that his or her Acharya has given to them, or all the essence, all the descriptions of on self or consciousness, which the seer, the realized seer had gone through in his Shravana Manana Nididhyasana stage up to the point of realization, all the description of all the Upanishads on consciousness, they all get validated in his existence in Samadhi, his existence as that, what we call as existence in Samadhi. Okay, now even a realized sannyasi, a realized jnani, till the time he exists in the world, may have some dharma, may have some duties to be undertaken, for which he gets up and he undertakes actions. His mind, his senses start acting. Now, apparently, what is happening? He opened his eyes and the mind, the senses all have started happening, acting. So, does it mean that the mind, senses, etc. had the power in themselves? They are self-sufficient in themselves, so that they just start acting when the eyes are opened. If they had that eternal power within them to start acting on their own, then the mind, senses, body, they all must indeed be eternal. They must never be perishing. They must never be losing their vigor at all. Whereas we know what happens to our mind, intellect, senses as the body grows old. Here, the seer smiles as he is aware that something which existed prior to his waking up from the state of Samadhi only that thing which existed in his Samadhi, with nothing else existing, that pure existence must be the cause for his body, mind, intellect, senses to act, which were not acting while he was in Samadhi. This state of Samadhi, getting from a Samadhi and realizing and knowing from where my body, my mind, my senses have got energy, how they have become conscious, how they have started acting. That awareness, that knowing is the essence of today's verse, which says, what does this say? Let us go back to the verse. Depending on self of the nature of consciousness, The body, senses, mind, and intellect engage in their respective activities. This depending is the key word essence here. Depending means getting the source energy illumined by the source consciousness. The BMI start functioning. Though consciousness in itself is changeless, motionless, when you remain in samadhi, neither is your body, mind, intellect active, nor you existing as pure consciousness is aware during that existence that now me, the consciousness, is going to illumine my body, mind, intellect. That thought itself, if that thought ever occurs, then you are not in the state of that pure existence, samadhi. Correct. So, sadhakas, if you ever are able to exist in that pure state, where, as per one of the meditations given in along with the existence in Sai session recently, the pure existence means not even aware that I am existing as pure awareness. If you are ever are blessed to exist for few seconds in that state of pure existence, then the last part of today's talk, the meditation experience and the post-meditation knowledge, it will be as clear to you as drinking a glass of water. It will be as transparent and as clear to you. Perhaps at the meditation level, there cannot be a direct exposition to today's verse. Hari Om Tat Sat.